Hi Nazia, can I just confirm that you can hear me? You should be able to speak now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. Brilliant. Right, and can you see? All right, let's have a look. You should be able to see, and I'm guessing you can see this presentation now?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. It feels good to be back on Zoom. Okay, so
Am I the only one here?
you know, it might be that we've got, I think some of them are, well, I think not some, I think some might be actually on YouTube and some might be actually on LinkedIn. It turned out a bit weird.
All right.
So you might be on Zoom. I personally prefer Zoom because you can interact, but with YouTube, I don't think that you can actually kind of interact. So we'll give it a couple of minutes for that people to join and we should be okay. Just out of curiosity, what is it, what kind of sector are you working in at the moment?
Community.
Oh, community pharmacy, right. Great.
Yeah.
And how are you finding at the moment? How's things with all these funding cuts and everything happening?
Oh, tough, quite tough. Yeah, we are in increasing pressure on how to get profits in. So yeah, I mean it's a multi.
Oh, you work for multiple.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not an independent. So yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of happening everywhere. Even myself, you know, we've got 2 pharmacies, so there's definitely a lot of pressure to basically, you know, making sure that you're a viable business. But it's also really important to understand kind of what's happening at the moment around policy and so forth. And you know, we're kind of in that position now that we basically have to do something, and if we don't do something, it's going to turn into a problem. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. So let's literally give it let's give it 2 minutes, and then inshallah we can start, and we'll let people join in as they come in. Good evening and welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Fahim. I'm a pharmacist, prescriber, contractor, and the founder of Medline. And Wasim, my elder brother, has just walked in.
Yeah, he left me to close everything. Hello, everybody. Great to have you all here.
Right. So today's webinar is probably
just simultaneously do this for you as well.
We're just sorting out the LinkedIn link. Sorry, just give me a second. Just starting that up.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Session on LinkedIn Live. I'm here with Fahim. So we are simultaneously running different platforms altogether. So thank you all for joining us.
Right. So are we ready to go?
Yeah. I'm sharing
Right. Let's restart this. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Fahim, pharmacist, prescriber, contractor, and founder of Medline. And today's webinar is part 3 of the opportunities in pharmacy and the pharmacy profession webinar series. And this is probably one of the most important webinars that I feel that I've delivered over the past half a year or so, starting last year. I think this also tops any of the clinical webinars that I've delivered because it really underpins everything that's happening in the NHS and really starts to gel the importance of making sure that you understand what's happening in the NHS so you can really basically benefit from the policy and how things are happening in the wider NHS. So a bit of academic jargon, and that's to do with the learning outcomes today that we have. So at the end of this presentation, you should all be able to identify key events and policies within the NHS that have led to changes in the community pharmacy contract. Now, it's not just community pharmacy that we're focusing on today, it's pharmacy as a profession. And you'll soon realize that these policies and these events have actually built up and led to the change that's occurred now. The point is that things don't just happen. We've had all this talk about funding cuts and all, this is all was the writing's been on the wall for a very long time. The opportunities were present 10 years ago. The opportunities are still present now. But it's really important to make sure that pharmacy as a profession really understands what's happening. You need to understand what is happening with policy, where the gaps in the market are, and how we can sync ourselves with the vision of the NHS, but also benefit financially. I'm a firm believer that if you benefit financially, you're going to distribute wealth, you're going to help others. So it's extremely important to make sure that that we are able to benefit financially from these opportunities that we have. The other thing is that being able to interpret the policy. There's one thing you knowing policy, there's one thing you understanding policy, but there's one thing you being able to interpret that policy and where the gaps in the market are. Where are the gaps in the market? That will allow you to recognize the opportunities that are available to pharmacists. And by the end of today, you're going to see there's huge opportunities. If I can benefit, so can everyone else. You're also going to be able to predict the changes that are required within the profession to make sure that we can sync pharmacy with the vision of the NHS. And I'm going to come back to this. This vision of the NHS is so important. Lastly, by the end of today, it's really important to make sure that you all have a development plan. A development plan for yourself personally, and also vision of what you want to achieve. If you're not sure where you're going to be in 2 years' time, if you don't know what you're going to be doing in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, you're wasting time. You need to have a clear structure that, okay, this is my plan. I was speaking to one of my good friends yesterday about developing, prescribing skills. And I asked the question, why is it you want to do non-medical prescribing? And the answer was just a shrug of shoulders, right? What's the point wasting time and developing your skills if you don't know how you're going to use those skills and how you're going to benefit financially from it? So after today, start thinking about, where do I see myself? I was just speaking to Nazia earlier on today, and I don't mean to pick on you, but whether it's Nazia, whether it's Nazmus, Fahim, whoever it is, you need to have a plan. You need to know where you're moving and where the NHS is going and how you fit into that vision. Right, so the first thing is the problem. We all need to understand what the problems are, or where is the problem with the NHS or everything that's happening. It's extremely, sorry, apologies folks, I just need to move this, I can't seem to move this picture, sorry, let me just escape this and move this out of the way because it's getting in my way. Right, okay, here we go, that's better. Right, so first of all, what's the problem? The problem is globally that everybody wants great healthcare, which is fine. We all want to have the best healthcare. We want the best doctors. We want the best medicines, but resources are finite. The States, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, European countries, the UK, you look everywhere, we've all got this problem that the need for healthcare and the demand is up here, but the resources are here. So when you have this problem, you're going to be struggling. So I want you to keep these points in mind throughout this whole presentation, that what's the problem? Because the thing is, right, if you know a problem and you can solve it, you're going to be in demand. Whether that means, financially or influencing others, you are definitely going to be in demand. But you need to understand what the problem is. Secondly, there's a rise in non-communicable diseases. What that means is diseases like heart disease, cancers, diabetes. These are all on the rise all over the world. And it's a problem because these diseases, if you're living with these diseases, you're going to be costing the healthcare system. And I've always said that it's not about that we have an aging population. It's not about an aging population. You can have an aging population. The key thing is living longer with disease. That's really important to understand, that having aging is not a problem. It's when you're aging with diabetes, when you're aging with, hypertension, when you're aging with cardiovascular disease, when you're aging with these risk factors, that's going to cause a problem. We've got lifestyle issues. How many of us are aware of individuals, who have issues with weight, and we'll be talking about nutrition. We'll be talking about the social aspect of things as well. There's one thing science, and there's one thing the social side. I think we were discussing this yesterday, the importance of the social side, and making sure that that we address that issue.
I think you've got to look at the financial model. So you look at 80s, 90s. One person could be essentially working, and the whole family would kind of live through that year. They'd go on their holidays, and it was all fine. Came the 2000s, and now you need two people working full time, and go forward 2008 plus. Now, both parents, for example, could be working, or on top of that, you need to take credit cards out. So your financial lifestyle has definitely changed, and that in itself is having a massive impact on the way we are living, and therefore, it's going towards mental illness. There's it's just a growing problem.
I think that's the key, right? Is poverty, health inequalities, all impact health. Resources, yeah, definitely. And we're going to be touching on population health. We're going to be touching on the pharmaceutical needs assessment. We're going to be talking about integration, and we're going to be talking about how we can all benefit mutually, and we can drive our profession forward. So that's one area. Workforce shortage of doctors, shortage of nurses, huge problems, because they are one of the building blocks to this healthcare system. There's a problem. A&E is far too expensive. Every time an individual who could have been seen in primary care ends up in hospital, it costs. You're looking at above £500 for just a day stay in hospital. We had a patient just literally, a couple of moments ago, who was suffering with, swelling of the tonsils. He had the lymph nodes were up and so forth. And if I wasn't able to prescribe, he was going to A&E.
Yeah.
In actual fact, he was referred from NHS 111 to us, because they're aware that we can prescribe. Otherwise, he was off to A&E. But that is something that could have been dealt with in community. But every time that same patient goes to A&E, it costs. Now, at this time, at 7 o'clock, most GP surgeries are closed. So, community pharmacy, we'll be touching on this, has a huge role to play. Antimicrobial resistance, that is, there's a huge issue with that. And if we are not able to have simple antibiotics available, these common diseases like cellulitis, even having, if you were going to go have some basic surgery done, these are going to turn into major infections. And in saying that, I had a patient last week who had keyhole surgery, and which you can imagine, because if you've got keyhole surgery, right, you can introduce an infection from the inside out and from the outside in. If we didn't have antibiotics to prescribe to her, she could have become septic, and then we know what happens after that. Childbirth, simple things. If we are not careful with looking after these antibiotics, it's going to be a problem. And Wasim, what do you think as a pharmacist? How important is it for us to engage in this and microbial resistance?
So I recently did a post on. There was a report in the Guardian about how they're looking for new antibiotics, but again, you can go on to looking at new ways of trying to treat problems, but essentially, kind of the basis of our talk today is a lot of these are lifestyle problems that could be prevented. So going back to antimicrobial resistance, I think the biggest issue there is, if people have a particular condition and they are constantly prescribed antibiotics, you've also got to think time-wise. How many times the patient constantly ring, no, I need an antibiotic. It's not just going to go away. And there's that pressure factor as well. How much part that plays into prescribing is another question altogether. But definitely, we are in an age where, you look at the situation we're in today with the coronavirus, for example. Yes, it's viral and not bacterial, but essentially the problems we're going to face coming over the next 10 to 15 years, especially lack of resources and climate issues. Um, we've got to have a workforce that's very dynamic and very accessible, because the longer it takes to see a patient, the longer it takes to, understand what's going on with them, and then, come, okay, now, because they've not been seen to for a week or 2 weeks, and now they have developed a bacterial infection that could have been prevented.
You know,
So
you've mentioned something extremely important, that is, climate change as well. That is probably a conversation for a later time, but this is important. Again, it comes down to you making sure you're able to look at things standing back. The advice that I was given is, if you're stood in front of a building and you're looking at it from this distance, you are not going to know if it's going in that direction, because you're stood so close. Step back, have a look, and just digress a bit and have a look how things are going. So, there's some, there's a lot. And I think we've got Bernadette mentioning some great points there about.
So what she said is, there's a really big problem in Scotland in terms of access in primary care to nurses and doctors in her town. So saving GP time in and out of hours is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem everywhere. And, thank you, Bernadette, for that. But there's some, it's important that we act on this now. And we'll be touching about this. There's one thing, we having all the ideas, but we must act on it. So throughout this whole discussion, we are going to be coming back to these problems. You need to, if you write these down, and we'll be discussing how you interpret these problems and how we can show the NHS or those who make policy how we can solve some of these problems, because everyone's tried. Every politician, everyone in the world has tried to solve this problem, but I think we are on the right tracks with this idea of integration.
That's right.
Multidisciplinary working. This is it. This is the way forward, and we'll be touching on that in a second. So let's rewind back to 2013. If you haven't read this, please make an effort to read this. It's available on the archives. It was written by the RPS, and it's called Now or Never. An absolutely amazing document, because in 2013, everything that's happened now, it had written out clearly in this document. I think it's about 50, 60 pages, and everything that's happened now, from funding cuts all the way to needing to work, developing different care models, all the way from pharmacy moving from a supply-based to a service-based clinical services, the threats are to community pharmacy and pharmacy as a profession, with other, professions upskilling and providing solutions. Everything was mentioned. It spoke about future models of care delivered through pharmacy, and that all depends on what is likely to happen in the wider NHS. We see, why is it so important? Why should we care with what happens to the NHS? How does it affect us as a community pharmacy or a pharmacist?
The NHS has been around since 1948. It's like a pillar for our community, right? You look at every single election, every single issue, even with Brexit going on, NHS was still also an issue, regardless of how people voted. The whole point was that the NHS was still important enough to be an issue. Now, in terms of pillars of community, well, the one thing the UK has that every other country has tried to look at, and even now, if you look at when Obama tried to do Obamacare, it was modeled on a model that takes care of the needy. No one is left behind, and that's what our NHS does. It doesn't matter what your financial standing in life is. When you walk into a NHS facility, you are going to be seen to and hopefully given the best of care that's possible, and that is a fundamental pillar of any community. Access to healthcare, and we're very lucky. So this is one thing we definitely can't essentially afford to mess up.
Yeah. So ultimately, the NHS is one of our biggest customers. Very important to keep that in mind. So if you don't know what your customer wants, how are you going to meet the needs? How are you going to be giving value to your customer? The NHS is one of our biggest customers. So if you are not aware of what your customer's needs are, what your customer would like, how you can help solve a problem, if you can't do that, why would they be interested in you? And that's being put pretty crudely. So that's what it meant by future models of care delivered through pharmacy depend on what is likely to happen in the wider NHS. Right. We have Henrik mentioning, I heard.
Yep. So there was an article in the Guardian whereby they were quickly able to um, find a new antibiotics by
So what was
using
the
a.
question?
So the question was, I heard new antibiotics were being developed with the help of supercomputers and AI. Guys, been following you now for a couple of weeks on topics. Oh, thank you, Henrik. Really appreciate that from Clyde's Bank. But yeah, so what Henrik is talking about is the article I shared a
Okay.
couple of weeks ago. In that, and it comes back to your antimicrobial resistance, and it'll kind of follow in with the future of pharmacy part when we get past this presentation. But essentially, just to put it in perspective for all of you, a couple of days ago, they did do an article in the Guardian, and you might have seen it in other resources where they used an AI-based algorithm to find new molecules and new, so essentially a new molecule to help tackle antimicrobial resistance, and it was done in a space of, I think it was a very short period of time. I'll actually look up the article and give you details. But yeah, it just shows the future of medicine, the future of healthcare, and where technology plays its role. But yeah, Henrik, thank you for that. There is a place for technology. And the truth is, when pharmacists say, where is our place, guys, that article is worth reading because it just shows you what pharmacists could be doing, not just in community pharmacies or hospitals, but if you're looking at career paths, well, partnering up with tech companies or in technology projects that are looking to solve a problem, there's your career path. It's no longer just industry, it's no longer just community, it's no longer just hospital.
And again, it's important for you to know what's happening around you.
Yep.
If you're not aware of what's happening around you, you can't see these opportunities. So what Wasim is kindly mentioned is he has a great insight in what's happening around him. When you have that kind of insight, you find solutions, you find problems, and you find a solution. Right. It also meant that the NHS has to become more productive. That makes sense. And where we need productivity, there might be some efficiencies that have to be put into place. And we'll get to that in a second. Pharmacy needs to communicate its benefits more effectively and will need to be proactive. That has summed up everything for us in 2013. That you need to communicate your benefits to those who make policy. You need to be more proactive. If you're not proactive and you're not engaging, you're not going to be getting funding. Absolutely was clear in 2013. Pharmacy will not be the first to receive funding, and we'll touch on that in a second why. Funding cuts were around the corner. This is in 2013.
I just come back to point number 3.
Yeah.
Pharmacy needs to communicate its benefits more effectively, and we need to be proactive. Folks, one of the things I'm going to say here is, you might be thinking, okay, am I gathering my data? Because essentially we are massive data centers. Each pharmacy is a humongous data center, the amount of data we're collating. But even before you go there and you're thinking, how do I communicate these benefits, whether it's through pharma outcomes or, whatever other platform you're using to record your data, when's the last time you posted online? Like what we're doing now, what me and Fahim are doing now. We're live doing a webinar, we're on different platforms of social media. The truth is we need more of us on there. If you look at any politician talk, they'll talk about my great NHS and our doctors and our nurses, and all credit to those professionals. But where's the word pharmacist? It never comes in a sentence. And the reason it doesn't is people are aware of us consciously, but subconsciously we're not positioned in a way where when you use the word healthcare, you don't come up straight away.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to start coming up is by posting more and getting more active online. And this, this is your profession. If you want to be recognized out there, you've got to be doing some of the things that essentially we're doing right now.
Absolutely. So we have to change the perception of the public. And I think Bernadette is mentioning some valid points here.
So here's another point from Bernadette. Thank you, Bernadette. I know we're picking on you here, but these are valuable points. So when we assess the public and we can reassure them that our impression is viral and not bacterial, and again, I'm getting to that point about the impressions, we can also assist with the very important point we were making regarding use of most appropriate treatment. Bernadette has triaged over 2,000 people and is now gathering evidence of the activity, and in some cases, an antibiotic is necessary to prevent a potential hospital admission, and other cases, we can keep them well without the need for antibiotics. Absolutely fair point.
Good stuff. Right, so what were the suggestions? The suggestions were build networks, groups, and propose funding models. I've highlighted integration because we're going to be getting to that. Keyword, integration, multidisciplinary working, being proactive, focus on prevention. Folks, it's really important to understand that a lot of the burden that we have on the NHS or in our healthcare system, there is a drive towards prevention. Think about it. When you look at the way we eat, our nutrition, our lives, how much of an impact does that have on your health? And without turning this into a science topic, but it's really important for us all to understand structure and function. That is anatomy and physiology, because ultimately, as a human, we should understand how this piece of kit works. And prevention is important. Why is it that if you have excess salt, you get high blood pressure? What the issues with that is? So, diabetes, chronic heart disease, these are some of the issues that are surrounding our population. And I think if we focus on prevention, lifestyle, holistic approach can make a huge difference. This was said in 2013. It also said change the public perception. You need to change the public perception. If 11,000 pharmacies, you could be a pharmacy in a little pocket doing extremely well, but the remaining 10,999 pharmacies are focusing on a supply model, then it's very difficult for that one individual to change the perception of patients. And we have to change the perception of patients, because if you don't do that, those who make policy are going to think the same thing. Well, what is it you really do? When you go into a chemist, it's the supply model. And obviously, not all of it is our fault, because that's how the funding contract's been.
I think the other issue is if you look at the supply model, traditionally, your lenders, the banks, whoever supported pharmacy, and it's been a strong sector for them to support, they're supported against the supply model. So I think one of the other key things here is to recognize that, yes, we do need to change our perceptions of how the public looks at us, but on a practical basis, if you've taken a massive loan when you purchase the pharmacy, or you've been building or building debt as a result of even if you took on care homes or whatever you did, now all of a sudden this funding cut has come, and now we're told, well, actually you need to go to a service-based model. How is that going to be funded? And this is why as much as one pharmacy can do great, or 10 can do great, fundamentally, we all need to have this approach of changing the model of pharmacy together, because in the end of the day, the government's not going to fund 5 pharmacies or 10 pharmacies. At the same point, it is going to be a big task, to change from a supply model to a service-based model. And as much as it's nice to have all these additional services, frankly, they don't even cover 20% of the costs, which comes back down to the basis of this webinar, which is to say, guys, from a financial perspective, we are going to have to look out for ourselves. We are going to have to look at private services to at least get us through, because no one's going to do it for you. But it has to be with the intention that whatever we do collectively builds a model for us, gives enough evidence to go back to the government and the powers at that be, and say, look, this is our evidence. We've done it off our own back. This is how much money we can save you. But more importantly, this is how much we put back in society by the services we're running.
Absolutely. Again, we are talking about integration. We're talking about working together and working with those individuals who are like-minded and forward-thinking. We don't have time to keep looking backwards, move forward. So we've had a bit of a think. So we know there's a problem. We know that we need a solution. We have a workforce crisis. We have antimicrobial issues, with the resistance with this. Access to healthcare is tricky as well. So where is the solution? Well, at that time, that particular document was a crystal ball, because the writing was on the wall at the time. And what happens afterwards is the NHS's response to this. So the NHS 5-year forward view, if you haven't read the 5-year forward view, you should go and read it, because everything that's happening has been based around this. This was in 2014, folks. So you're looking at 6 years ago. The plans were in motion. What they wanted to do was deliver high quality care whilst making efficiencies. And we know what that means. Cuts around the corner, focus on prevention, develop new ways of working. Again, integration, integration, develop the workforce. Just after 2014, I think it was 15, we had Health Education England that was born. And the whole focus of Health Education England is to upskill the workforce to get it prepared for the vision of the NHS. And in 2014, we spoke about antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship. So everything that was happening in 2013 that the Royal Pharmaceutical Society spoke about in 2014, the NHS developed the 5-year forward view, and it was all about making sure that they get the best care at the best price for the taxpayer. What it meant for pharmacy, funding cuts. There was another document that was called Shaping Pharmacy for the Future. We had a letter that was sent to Sue Sharp on the 17th of December. You can search it on the archives. And it said that there were going to be cuts to pharmacy. So this was happening in 2015. The cuts were there since 2015. This wasn't new. If you haven't read the Carter Review, I would really recommend that you have a look at this, because this was a huge shift from a supply model to a clinical service model. And what it basically showed is the Carter Review 2016, write it down, search it out. It basically said that clinical pharmacists have a huge opportunity to give benefit to the NHS, clinical pharmacists. So what we mean by a clinical pharmacist is where you're focusing on developing your clinical skills. A clinical pharmacist doesn't mean that you work in a GP practice or hospital. You're a clinical pharmacist, whether you're working in primary care or secondary care. Even I guess if you're working in an industry, I guess you could be a clinical pharmacist. It spoke about medicines optimization and polypharmacy. Not all polypharmacy is bad. It's inappropriate polypharmacy that's a problem. We'll be touching on that briefly.
By the way, my view on clinical pharmacy is, I'm pretty sure we all studied the same degree. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's I won't go into that because that might be a tad controversial. But yeah, absolutely. Look, one profession, one direction. 300 million of wasted medicines with 150 million could have been avoided. So this Carter Review found that actually, the second most expensive or where we have the most revenue in the NHS budget goes on to meds. But 300 million are wasted, out of that 150 million are avoidable. It spoke about evidence-based practice. It spoke about making sure that we are focusing on an evidence-based practice. It spoke about new ways of working, hub and spoke. Folks, hub and spoke isn't new. The talks had started 4 or 5 years ago. And it spoke about integration.
Actually, hub and spoke, if you look at Pharmacy to You, started in 1999. So, we've already seen hub and spoke. Not exactly in those terms, but the fact that, something is done remotely and then just sent out. It's been around for more than, 20 years.
Absolutely. So, Carter Review, have a look at it. But the essence of this is that what they showed that a clinical approach was beneficial to the NHS. So there's a shift now away from a supply of medicines to clinical services. There's a focus on medicines optimization, the need for a clinical pharmacist, and as a result, our contract is now in transition from a supply-based to a service-based. So we'll be touching on that in a second, but the Carter Review was very, very important to the shift that we have now, where there's a talk about, services, because evidence, folks, evidence is important. And what the Carter Review showed was that if you focused on clinical services, medicines optimization, you could reduce admissions to hospital. You can make hospital pharmacy more efficient. You can improve health and welfare. So this was quite important for pharmacy. So again, let's look at it. We've got shortage of doctors and nurses. We have an aging population with disease. We have antimicrobial resistance. We now have an issue with wastage of medicines, which is a huge burden on the NHS. Who's going to provide the solution? NHS is saying, where's the solution? Who's going to give us a solution to this? So those problems make a huge difference to your opportunities if you can see what the problems are and how we can help with this and how we can benefit. So then on the NHS, we had the next steps to the NHS, and it was the next steps to the NHS 5-year forward view. This is in 2017 and 18. It spoke about these urgent treatment centres to help the NHS. It spoke about enhanced NHS 111, which is happening now. It spoke about developing the workforce and digitalization.
Yeah.
What do you reckon about, what's it speaking about digitalization?
So digitalization, I think everybody should be familiar with it now because everybody's on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So digitalization is essentially having a healthcare model which is not just physically based, but is also accessible through the use of technology, which we already know. It's got to be safe and secure. But the way they're looking at it is, and to be fair, it makes absolute sense to me. Is we've got such a wide ranging population in different circumstances, living in different environments. We're talking about the UK, but you look at countries like Nigeria, you look at some of the countries like Afghanistan or these countries where there is a big gap between healthcare access physically, and as a result of that, what is the fastest way in getting access to healthcare? It's going to be digital. It's going to be, whether you have your telemedicine platforms or whether you do it through apps, but absolutely it's the future. And then that's essentially what digitalization is heading towards. So
mental health, we all know, again, that's a conversation for, we can spend probably all day speaking about mental health. And again, I've highlighted integration. So 2014, 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 5 years, there's this talk of a multidisciplinary way of working, integrating and collaborating, working together to solve problems, working together to solve the issues of populations. And this is where we're going to start talking about PCNs. This is where the idea comes from. It's nothing new. It's been happening. It started in 2014. All these models were being tried. This is where it all comes from. This is where it comes from, this idea of having 50, 60,000 people or 30, 50,000 people in this one pocket and everyone around there trying to benefit and help this population. It's collaboration and working together. What that meant for pharmacy at that time is to upskill and develop your prescribing services. It also said about funding cuts were now inevitable. It's going to happen. I'm a great advocate of making sure that you invest in yourself, right? You can have we go and invest in the newest car, latest gadgets. But when did you actually stop and look about upskilling this chip right here? This chip is the most important chip that you have. You'll have the latest iPhone, you'll have the latest, I don't know, smartwatch or whatever they are. What about this? When did you stop and start to update this chip right there in your brain? Seriously, guys, you need to start to upskill yourself. If you're still doing the same things that you were doing 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and you're expecting a different result, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So you must upskill yourself. And again, we've seen some of the issues that have happened, and we'll be discussing the benefits of upskilling and how we as a business have benefited with upskilling. Then we had the recent NHS long-term plan, 2019. There's a 20.5 billion budget. In a nutshell, reduce hospital admissions, focus on prevention, integration, development of these primary care networks, so we can expand the workforce, we can work together. There's a huge drive towards digitalization, the use of technology to benefit patients. And, we're already using TytoCare, which is, if you don't know what TytoCare is, search up a wonderful device. I've used it for teaching purposes. We're able to treat, if one of my colleagues in Bicester was to call today, she can use the TytoCare. She can do an examination of the ear. She can do an examination of the oral cavity. She can send me, heart sounds, lung sounds. There's so much that can be done to safely diagnose patients. So we're not just diagnosing patients on the history or just over the phone, but you're using technology to aid your diagnosis. Antimicrobial resistance, and there's a huge drive towards investing in primary care. What it meant for pharmacy, well, Wasim, would you agree with this? Do more for less? you think there's some truth in this?
Yeah, I think there's more going on behind the scenes when it comes to the pharmacy sector. Uh, and I don't want to get into the politics of it just right now, but essentially, yes, do more for less is kind of what they've put out to you, because it's very simple. If someone's funding a service and they've funded it for £100 and they've told you these are the things we need you to do, then suddenly they decide, actually we need you to do a lot more, but we're not going to fund it yet. You need to prove yourself. Okay, so everything you've built your whole business around now has been turned upside down because the funders said, well, actually, and by the way, this is the risk of having one funder. This is the risk of having, and essentially, we are
One
contractors in the,
paymaster.
yeah, one paymaster. And I think one of the key things Fahim's been trying to get across in this webinar is the reason why you want to upskill is no one can take that away from you, but it also opens doors and opportunities, which, to be fair, are many, especially with what technology give, the opportunities that are available. So, I think that's you're right. Do more for less is kind of what they put at us, but I think there was that element was also put in there to say, well, see how much money we can save. And I really do believe they did want to get a lot of pharmacies, to see how many they could essentially get rid of and reduce, because they seem to think that the country should be able to do fine with only having a certain X amount of pharmacy. I know there was a report which you shared to me from a was it LPC meeting,
yeah.
where they
Minutes were
said
there.
the current funding model essentially only supports 8,500 to 9,000 pharmacies. The PSNC, of course, afterwards denied that that was the case. At least that's my understanding of it. But essentially, if you look at it, it's fair in terms of what that comment. The current funding model. How many pharmacies will it support if it's just based on supply? So yeah, do more for less. That was one of the things that they wanted us essentially to do. And then, of course, there was a shift from supply-based contract to clinical services, which again I've spoken about, but the problems with that are apparent. Hub spoke model, yeah. Look, you know what? Hub spoke model sounds great, and I'm a big fan of utilizing technology everywhere we can. But come on, let's be serious. Patients are used to getting excellent healthcare that we have provided for even before, by the way, we opened our own pharmacies.
Yeah.
Pharmacists have been doing that for over 30, 40, 50 years, right? Now, all of a sudden, that patient X who used to come to the pharmacy and get that advice has been told, well, actually, there's a more efficient model in getting your medication to you, and it's called hub and spoke, which is fine as well. Like I said, in certain circumstances, that will work. But, that patient X now needs their warfarin tablets today. Your
Yeah.
delivery hasn't come to for whatever reason, it's been delayed. And for me, it seems that it was just kind of putting the government documents, Department of Health documents, as a solution without any thought behind it. How is this going to work? So for me, hub and spoke, yes, it's an option. Is it a solution? Not really. Is it a good enough solution to say, well, we can get rid of another 3,000 pharmacies because hub and spoke will pick up the workload? I don't think so.
No, I think, I absolutely agree with everything that Wasim has said there. And, just have a think about things and step back and just really have a think about how things are. Closure of around 3,000 pharmacies, you can do the research, but I think that's what is going to happen, because, the funding contract that we have at the moment, it's kind of in between a supply model to a clinical service model based, but the funding's not there yet. So, we have an issue with that. And workforce issues. There is a drive towards primary care, which is great, but it's tricky for pharmacies at the moment. With this, with this recent talks about giving positions to pharmacy technicians. Ultimately, if you need a bigger workforce in primary care, you close pharmacies. If you close pharmacies, either I lose my job and I go find a job in primary care, or the other way around. Because as much as you can pump into primary care, you need a workforce. So what's the solution? I don't know. Maybe this is some sort of, it could just be a conspiracy theory, but just have a think. If you close 3,000 pharmacies, all of a sudden you've got a bigger pool of workforce. Where's that workforce going to go? They need it in primary care, you put it in there. That causes an issue for community pharmacy. So there's a lot happening, but we'll probably stay away from that conversation.
No, I'm just going to point at that, regardless of whether that's what they want or not. The whole point is, if 3,000 pharmacies, for example, close, and you've got all these excess of pharmacists, or as you say, a workforce pool or a pool of workforce, and they are then going to other sectors. The whole point of this NHS 5-year plan was preventative, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be community focused.
Correct.
So you close the very thing that offers the community this whole community feeling. So, you can walk to a pharmacy within, I think, 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's generally the same people you see all the time. You build that relationship with them. You're comfortable having a conversation with them. So all of a sudden, if these community hubs now disappear, then and you're expecting a preventative lifestyle based healthcare system, it just doesn't make sense to me, because the one profession that, to be fair, you could have seen without having to book an appointment, seen 7 days a week, yes, 7 days a week, and late hours. I know initially we were open till midnight, so and now you're saying that no longer is relevant. It just goes against the very ethos of what they're trying to promote. And for us as pharmacists, I think that's something we need to kind of stand up for and say, well, if you expect us to do more, you expect us to play a prevention role, but you're getting rid of the very spaces that allow communities to come together in, because essentially community pharmacy is one of the very few community spaces that people can come to. Then it defeats the whole point.
Right, so what's next for pharmacy? Well, the funding is static and inflation hasn't been accounted for. That's really important, because if you've got funding of 2.5 billion, 2.5 billion doesn't have the same buying power in 5 years. Okay, so you're going to be making a loss.
It doesn't have the same buying power today.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, extraordinary circumstances, but the drugs you're buying for 47 pence are all of a sudden $4.99 or $7.99 a box. Already that funding is not sustainable.
Absolutely. You're really upset, aren't you, with this? I can tell.
I am.
Because
I spent the whole day chasing drugs and sorting out queries upon queries about where we can source this from. And every supplier you ring, you're told, oh, by the way, the prices are going up. My point is we're in a very extraordinary situation with the coronavirus, right? Every industry is suffering, whether it's the airline industry. But again, I'm going to come back to, this has been going on with pharmacy, not today. It's been going on for, nearly a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
We significantly invested and changed our business model, knowing that the future was changing. And, however we did it, we got about doing it with a lot of support from a lot of people. But ultimately, it comes down to this, this is not a problem that's just happened today. It's been going on for, over a year and a half, yet we're expected to change, the business model. And I can tell you, going through what we've been through, it's not easy. It's bloody hard. It takes a lot of time and effort and determination and persistence, because there's lots of times when you think, what am I doing this for? I might as well
But just think of all the physiological changes that must happen as a result of the stress.
Yeah, of course.
As much as you get through it, but just imagine on how much burden that puts on your body, with all the stress.
No, physically and mentally. Again, this is a conversation that needs to be had. We're now talking about, pharmacists struggling from mental health. Let's look at, our profession, as well as the health, whether you look at the nurses, doctors, everybody really. Fundamentally, we deal with issues professionally. So you have a patient walks in, tells you a problem, is upset, you deal with it professionally, and then you move on to the next case, not sparing a minute or thought to thinking, that emotion that you've just experienced is now imprinted in your memory and in your brain. So now you've got all this buildup of all these negative emotions, and no one's having those conversations with us. And, when we talk about preventative healthcare, one of the biggest issue is what we're suffering through psychologically. It's not just a physical thing, and obviously the physical as a result suffers. So no, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of pressure with all this. And I'm glad, initially when you said to me, Seem, let's do this webinar, I was like, okay, went through the presentation. I was thinking, okay, these things are people, that they should already know this. But it's only when you really go into the detail of it, you realize, actually, guys, this has happened to us. And we've been working crazy hours over the last 5 or 10 years,
Yeah.
or even longer, and we didn't even realize this change happened, because obviously you consciously listen, oh, in the next 5 years we're going to have to be more clinically orientated, or we're going to have to be doing more services, but you're working so hard that each day comes and goes by that we don't necessarily really focus on what's happening. Yes,
Yeah.
you've heard the conversation, but it's not necessarily registered in our heads.
And I think we, at some point, we also fell to that trap.
We did.
Where you're rat race.
Yeah.
You're literally just every day you're waking up, you're doing the same thing again and again, and the world is passing by.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we're going to be talking about redefining your business. So now, if we now put everything into perspective, can you now see the opportunities that pharmacy has? Can you see the struggles of the NHS and where this workforce can help these issues? For pharmacists, and again, Wasim, I'll ask your opinion on this, but I think it's important for pharmacists to work in partnership now with pharmacies. Sorry, you need to put it this way. If I was employed by you and I said to you, Wasim, look, I can increase your revenues by opening up an aesthetics clinic in your pharmacy, or by opening up a travel clinic, or by offering these XYZ things, focus on prevention.
You took the workload off me.
And I took the workload off you.
No,
Would you be wanting to work in partnership with me?
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah?
Yeah, of course.
So, pharmacists, ultimately, if you develop a case and you go to these business owners, I mean, certainly if a pharmacist was to present to us and gave us a business case and said, look, I want to work with you. I don't just want to work for you. Let's change the business model. Let's change the logistics. That would be absolutely, key for us. Definitely I would be very much interested in listening to what my colleague, I don't want to say, employee, what my colleague had to say. So pharmacists, think about being brave, think about upskilling yourself, think about working in partnership with those pharmacies that you work for. And there's no harm in having conversations. You could be working with a multiple, it doesn't matter. Have the conversations. If you don't ask, you don't get. Upskill and educate yourself so you can provide a solution to the problems. Now imagine if we had every single pharmacist in community or primary care and hospital care was upskilled to an enhanced level, where you could treat minor illnesses, you could diagnose, you could appropriately prescribe. If you enjoyed aesthetics, you had that side of the business. So you're focusing on the private market as well. And we'll get to that in a second. You could develop these new models of working. In addition to that, you will be in sync with what's going to be happening with the NHS.
And on top of that, as well as having the clinical skills and having the right approach to prescribing, I've always believed pharmacies and pharmacists were such a dynamic sector. It's not just clinical for us. We're business owners.
Yep.
We have to deal with our own accounts, and when I say deal with our accounts, yes, you bring your data and give it to the accountant, but essentially, we're looking at the price of drugs, we're looking at the price of bottles. So, we understand the retail part of it, right? We understand the issues with the retail, just like the retail sector's suffering now. We've been through it. So you have this whole rounded professional who has a multitude of talents. If you were to get me and ask, where your opportunities are, I'm just going to go on about it all day, because I just think there's so much opportunity for pharmacists, and it's not just based on a particular sector. And, the world is literally your oyster right now.
I mean, I'll just mention something that I, over the last, 6 or 7 months, have been invited to talk Myself and Wasim are regularly invited to do talks. Just by getting content out there, by upskilling yourself, and by getting your voice heard. Talk, make it evidence-based. Benefiting financially, look at the private model. You're going to have to tap into the private model. We're going to be touching on that in a second, that we don't have a choice. In order to make this pharmacist or pharmacy business viable, you're going to have to tap into that private model until the NHS doesn't, we don't have that contract being in sync. So as a pharmacist, what you could do, develop your prescribing services, educate yourself, not just prescribing, focus on nutrition, focus on weight loss, focus on all those things that have because medicines can augment the process. They don't solve the problem. If you've got a crappy lifestyle, it doesn't matter what antibiotics you take, you're going to have a problem.
Someone can come to you with a chest infection, but if they're living in a damp house, they're going to keep coming back to you.
Absolutely. If you're not having good nutrition, folks, if you're not eating properly, if you're not sleeping properly, if you're not looking after yourself, and you're not giving yourself the right nutrition, the right fuel, you're not going to feel well. So it doesn't really matter if you're a prescriber, but you need to be educating people on the fundamentals of how this human body works. And, now that we're talking about the human body, I'm very soon going to start doing physiology webinars. So I'm super excited about that. So we've done, we focused on anatomy, but we're going to be focusing on physiology. And it's absolutely mind-blowing how we're going to look at a cellular level and work your way up all the way to what we see, from a cellular level all the way to a level on tissues. Aesthetics, again, if you missed that webinar, that was delivered by myself and Dr. Camille. It's available on YouTube. Have a look. If you want to get into the aesthetics market, it's a huge market. It's a huge industry. You can do well, but you need to know how to market yourself. You need to know about injection anatomy. You need to know how to make this product viable. Partnership with pharmacies, new models of working, develop your prescribing skills. In the local pharmacies in Oxford, I'm in talks with them to also start to prescribe on their behalf. If you're a prescriber, you could start to prescribe aesthetic treatments for beauticians and so forth. Work with like-minded people. Why is that so important?
I think like-minded people, so self-development industry has probably been one of the biggest proponents of this, like-minded individuals. So one of the things you look at all the self-development industry kind of really pushes is collaborate. And one thing I've always said is, when destruction comes, it's going to be indiscriminate as it is right now. So why not collaborate indiscriminately? And that for me is really a fundamental basis of how we can kind of do this process of change, but at the same time limit the amount of upheaval it causes. For example, like I said, we went through hell to get to where we are today. Similarly, when most of you are looking at your business models, or even if you're a pharmacist looking to look at how you're going to increase your career, the thing you're going to be looking at is how much is this going to cost you. What is the opportunity cost for when you try to transition, and fundamentally at that point, what is the way you can reduce your risk by working with others. It's as simple as that. One person can do only so much, whereas 500 people can do so much more. And the thing with the script model was, or the supply chain, is how many items am I doing? With this particular model of a service-based approach, it is going to be that element of upskilling yourself, not just clinically, but your business skills, your communication skills, leadership skills. In fact, I feel pharmacists are leaders, and we just need to get across that. If anything, whenever there is a leadership seminar or a leadership talk, go call a pharmacist, because we lead from the front lines every single day, and from a variety of different perspectives. But yeah, going back to that, just go and collaborate. And I'm going to again push this same example. If you do have a physical space, a community pharmacy, and you have consultation rooms, in the end of the day, you can't do everything. You can't all now completely change and take time away from running your businesses. Or if you're a pharmacist and you've just qualified and you've got tuition fees to pay, it's not as simple as just literally now just completely upskilling and changing your whole direction. You've got to do a mixture of both. So your rooms, what can we do with your rooms? You can work with other professions. You can bring on nutritionists within those rooms. You can bring nurses. Wound care, for example, nurses
Huge market.
It's a massive
Huge
market. But nurses are probably the best trained wound care specialists. Not, it doesn't mean pharmacists can't do it, but I'm just saying, you know, you got to look at your own situation and just think, you know, what could I be doing? You know, do I really have the time to be upskilling on this particular part, or do I need to upskill on this particular part? But then that gap you see where you can't put your time into it, who can fill it?
Yeah, I think you know, you're spot on. That it's important to work with like-minded people so you can get from A to B a lot quicker. You don't have to make the mistakes that others have made. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I'll give you an example of myself. When I did my non-medical prescribing, if I would have been given the advice at the time that do your clinical skills training first, don't worry about non-medical prescribing, get your clinical skills, you will save time. But what I did my non-medical prescribing, and then, you know, panicked. Okay, now how do I put these skills into practice? So working with like-minded people, pushing yourself, stepping out your comfort zone. Folks, you've got to get out your comfort zone. You can't just sit in your comfort zone, expect different results. You know, it isn't easy talking on this level. What do you reckon? It's not, you know, as much as it comes across that it's natural, it's something you work at. You know, I think between us both, I think Wasim is very natural when it comes to talking on these, you know, events and so forth. But it's something that I've had to practice, and it's not something that I, you know, every time I do something on my heart is that sympathetic system is always running, you know, but you have to get out your comfort zone. You've got to challenge yourself. You've only got one life, you know, you've got to make the most of it. And if you're not doing something you enjoy, stop doing it. Find a way to do something that you enjoy, because you'll get good at it and you'll do really well out of it.
Something Jane said in a previous webinar, you know, if you're going to be doing this every day of your life, at least to a certain point. And if you don't love it and if you don't enjoy it, then really think, you know, is this where I want to be? I just want to come towards the pharmacy part of it. There's a lot of pharmacists now thinking of changing profession and so on, because, you know, in a way they say, well, we're just out of love of this profession because of X or Y, or it's just got really tough. But you know, there is light in the end of the tunnel, and I'm hoping, at least through what we've been talking about today, you do see other ways of approaching this profession, whether you're a business owner or whether you are a, you know, individual. There's opportunities there that you can really leverage right now, and this is where technology has a big part to play, because whereas before you needed £500,000 or whatever it was to buy a physical space, now at the finger of, you know, at your fingertips, you've got a device that allows you to literally market yourselves, get your services out there. It's just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, but yep, absolutely. Community pharmacies. I'm not sure if it is 238 million is still unallocated. I need to check that. I can't remember if that is the case. So if anybody knows, just, you know, just shout out, let me know. But we know that, you know, this business model, the way it is right now, if you just focus on the NHS services, you're going to struggle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So develop your private services, pharmacists, community pharmacy owners, contractors. You're going to have to step out your comfort zone. You're going to have to step out your bubble, and you're going to have to invest in your staff. You're going to have to invest in people. You're going to have to invest in those who have been with you, who are the cornerstones to your business. You have to educate them. You've got to work with them. You've got to work on the private services. So if you work on the private services, you're in a position to be able to then be prepared for what's coming with the NHS. And talking about the NHS, we must engage with these primary care networks. We must engage with primary care. We must engage with secondary care. You know, yes, you may argue, you know, what benefit is it for us? Because that's true. You know, I'm not aware of any sort of financial implications of you, other than, you know, I think it works out to £600-700 if you were to PCN lead and so forth. At this very moment in time, I appreciate that there isn't actually a financial reward, but we need to engage with them. You have to work together. Ultimately, we are here for patients. We want to make a difference to the lives of others. That's why we're in this profession. But imagine this, right? Imagine that your systems were tied in with the surgeries. So let's say we've got surgery X and we've got, let's use our example, Amy's pharmacy. Our PMR system is connected to theirs. Fahim, myself as a pharmacist, can prescribe and put all my data on there. Every time a patient presents, let's say he has atrial fibrillation or he's on lithium, and we do a medication review, or we're able to take blood, you can log it on the system. Medicine optimization, structured clinical reviews, everything can happen. The advantage for the surgery is that you're helping them. The advantage for you is you're getting footfall through the door. At this very moment in time, I'm not aware of a financial reward, but ultimately you'll start to generate that footfall. And that's when you can focus on your private services. You can focus on nutrition. You can focus on health. You can focus on gathering data. You can focus on recording data. So community pharmacies, community pharmacies, you need to be thinking about how we can work together with PCNs, how we can engage with primary care, how we can give them solutions. Invest in staff and work with your team. Travel clinics, minor illness clinics, blood testing, nutrition, renting of rooms, CQC registration, aesthetics, everything is there. Pharmacists, upskill yourself. Community pharmacy contractors, invest in your staff. Work with your staff, develop data. Think about it, right? If you've got the skills, you're in a position to have a conversation with me because you can give me benefit. You can give me value. If I have a pharmacist who goes, look, I'm not prepared to work at this rate, but in return, I can do X, Y, Z. Why would I not be interested? Secondly, know your customer. We're moving away from a supply model to clinical services. You're going to have to know how many patients are on digoxin, how many patients on lithium, how many patients are on NSAIDs and might need a PPI or don't have a PPI, how many patients are on clopidogrel and omeprazole, which
Actually,
is
what you're saying now.
Yeah.
In terms of you saying you don't see a direct link, I see a link straight away there. Data is probably the biggest currency there is in the world
Okay.
right now. And then from what you're saying, in terms of knowing all those, you need to know your lithium levels, your NSAIDs, your PPIs, and so on. As I said, farmers have been gathering data for years. It's just how do you now transform that data into helping you supply a certain amount of services? For example, if you're thinking what services are going to work in my area, well, just go on your PMRs and just pull that data up, and that will tell you, well, if a lot of people are on the sertralines, fluoxetine, citalopram, and a majority of us will have the same data when it comes to that. Maybe it's time to get a collaboration between yourselves and a psychologist or a mental health specialist, a CBT specialist. Straight away it tells you. In fact, that data can be used to help you develop your services again without taking risks unnecessarily. You don't even have to now go and invest on doing a marketing campaign to find out what your patients want, because you've already got the data on what you could be doing.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. You spoke about data. It's important to understand that we're working on populations now. So the NHS is moving towards focusing on population, and you should be aware of your population needs assessment. Have a look. Go on Google, type in Oxfordshire population needs assessment. Staffordshire population needs assessment. Wherever you're working, find out what the gaps in the market are. Locally, where can you help? Are you working in deprived areas where there's a need for XYZ? Fleetwood, Blackpool, wonderful examples, some wonderful work they're doing. We had a doctor there who is absolutely, who was just sick of patients walking to the clinic and were being unwell. So he decided to do a holistic approach, got in touch with local charities, got in touch with the church, got in touch with different organizations, started running health clinics, social prescribing, exercise clubs. There's plenty of room to benefit patients and benefit financially.
In fact, we'll probably share the link of that article, which I think we should have, and it just shows the amount of health benefits they're generated by this doctor doing this. And again, your community pharmacies are perfect places for hubs. If you do close at a certain time, get the community to come in the evening and have a coffee session in one of your consultation rooms if you have the space. If you don't, come together and rent out a space for that evening and bring all these groups of people together, which works on a more functional medicine based approach.
Absolutely. So just to tidy up, pharmacy as a profession, engage with PCNs, upskill our profession, take responsibility for our profession. We cannot leave it into the hands of others. We as pharmacists need to make decisions that are right for us. I think for too long, others have made decisions on our behalf, and we've landed where we are now. Work with like-minded people, gather evidence. And this nicely moves on to exactly what MedLearn is all about. You know, there's one thing developing clinical skills, entrepreneurship, but we are working with pharmacists. We are gathering evidence to upskill and show the benefits. You know, this year on our MedLearn Mastery program, so that's a 6-month program that takes you from, it teaches you clinical skills, it teaches you business skills, it teaches you how to, you know, how to benefit financially. And we take you on that journey from start to finish, you know, from anatomy to physiology to pathology, internal medicine. You know, this 6 months worth of training takes you from A to Z, where you can safely diagnose, prescribe, and treat for commonly seen minor illnesses, whether it's in primary care or, you know, in community pharmacy. But we are working with these students to demonstrate that it can be done. We're developing a family, we're developing a culture, and we're developing what I feel is the future of pharmacy and where we're going to be in the future.
Absolutely agree. And I think, again, I just think it's a holistic model in what we're trying to do here, where we're not just focused on one particular piece of learning. Essentially, what we're trying to get across in these programs is the ability to self-learn and the ability to keep learning. See, there's a very simple process. You need to learn, you need to reflect on your learning, and then, of course, after that, you need to implement what you've learned.
Yeah.
And most importantly, share. 4 stages: share everything you're doing now. There's nothing wrong in sharing. If you're successful at something and you can get it across to others, believe me, it will only increase your own businesses, your credibility, and all the rest. But importantly, you'll develop a network of very highly qualified professionals who, are so diverse in their skill set. What greater thing can there be? And with that kind of power, the opportunities are endless.
I did a video on the MedLearn Mastery program. Go there on my YouTube channel, have a look. It speaks about the program, how you can benefit clinically, how you can benefit financially, and you can help patients. So it's it's a 3-pronged attack, and you're in sync with the vision of the NHS. Because if you're able to benefit financially, you will distribute that wealth, you will help others. Yep, everyone, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your, spending your precious time with us. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, after all that talking, it'll be good. If anybody does have any comments or thoughts to share, happy to discuss them now, going forward. Before I know, it's nearly 8:15, and it's been a long day, and I know it's going to be a lot of long days coming forward with everything that's going to be going on over the next few weeks and months, uh, in the extraordinary situation that we're in. So yeah, if anybody does have anything to say, they're more than welcome to add on. But yeah, just coming back on the article, I just wanted to share, and again, I see a whole space for artificial intelligence and technology in our community pharmacies, let alone just specialists. So the article was called "Powerful Antibiotic Discovered Using Machine Learning for the First Time." It was in the Guardian. Again, I'll share the link. Something Enrique mentioned, and it was by a team at MIT. And what they did was they got a list of nearly 2,500 plus drugs and natural compounds, and they were looking to see how well, or if not, the substance blocked the growth of the E. coli bug. And so essentially, once the algorithm had learned what the molecular features were for good antibiotics, the scientists involved started working on a library of more than 6,000 compounds, investigating for treating various human diseases. And what they did was, rather than looking for potential antimicrobials, the algorithm just focused on the data it was given on what the effective compounds looked like, and essentially just boosted the chances of the drugs being discovered. And they did. They found a compound that was absolutely more powerful than some of the ones we've already had. And what it showed was it killed Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the bug that causes TB. There were other strains that it really had a effect on. And again, this is what an algorithm with a bit of machine learning
I just
and
just
scientists.
yeah, I just want to mention, the importance of working with like-minded people, and a wonderful friend, a mentor, a teacher, and one of the one of my colleagues, Jignesh Patel, who actually was one of the judges at the Pharmacy Award. And it makes a difference if you're working with like-minded people and you're working with people that share the same vision that you have. And a lot of this is my colleagues, my peers, Jignesh as well, who encourage me, who basically who support me, which is important, to make sure that you're with individuals who are driving you to challenge yourself, because pharmacy has a huge opportunity. We've just got to engage, we've got to upskill, develop our clinical skills, and we've got to develop clinical skills that are useful. We don't want to be spending 18 months, 19 months. It doesn't take 18, 19 months to learn your anatomy, physiology, and internal medicine. Believe me, it doesn't take that long. In 6 months can be done with the right training. So we need pharmacists who can utilize their clinical skills on the ground level. We don't need pharmacists writing long essays. We need, there is a role for essay writing. No issue with essay writing, but ultimately you have a patient who presents with a certain disease. How do you ensure that this patient is right for me to treat? How do I make sure that earache is otitis media or is otitis externa? How do I make sure that tonsillitis isn't quinsy or gone into the retropharyngeal space, or infectious monoclonal? So we want to teach pharmacists the clinical skills that you need to be able to apply your knowledge and benefit financially. Really important to make sure that you're benefiting financially, because if you don't benefit financially, you're not going to survive. For those of you who are not aware of these websites, King's Fund, Nuffield Trust, NHS Networks, put them on your speed dial, whatever it is, put them in your favorites. You will find out everything that's happening with the NHS and policy. Read them. They're think tanks, they advise. You will start to understand other people's ideas so you can formulate your ideas.
I think also, going forward, to kind of wrap this up, keep networking within your profession, but keep networking outside your profession as well. I really do believe we have so much to offer this world going forward in any industry. That's one of the things I would definitely do. Keep focusing also on the ability to how you communicate, and I don't just mean physically or using physical language, but I mean in terms of how you're communicating online, how you're communicating digitally. And again, if you don't have the right team or the right skills to be able to help you with that, go on fiverr.com or just go use Upwork, or go on LinkedIn and just say, creatives, I need help with my website, or I need help with my LinkedIn strategy, or I need help with my Facebook lives, whatever. The whole point is, go there. They are all available, and you can collaborate. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and start to learn everything yourself, but at the same point, get a good understanding of the kind of skill sets that you're going to need.
Just to wrap up on this point, we're one profession, whether it's community pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, or primary care. One direction. Let's all work together and pull in one direction. We don't have time to argue amongst ourselves in community pharmacy or argue with primary care. Let's work together. Let's engage. Let's see how we can benefit. Gather data, start to engage, and listen. One advice that Jignesh had mentioned to me, and they do, is learn. Listening is key. Listen to what others have to say, and then you'll have your chance to say your opinion. So thank you for everyone who's attended again, and if you have any questions, certainly you can get in touch through LinkedIn, or my number is always lurking around LinkedIn somewhere. Get in touch, we can have a conversation, and if there's any questions you have or any advice you need on anything, please get in touch. And I wish you all a wonderful evening, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night. And as I said, appreciate all the people who stayed for the webinar. It is late, so have a wonderful evening, and catch you all soon again. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.